The Coelacanth, which is not pronounced Coelacanth, as I have always wanted to say it. The Coelacanth, that is Coelacanth, is an ancient fish that was thought to be extinct forever. It looks like a dinosaur fish. It looks like the megalodon from Jurassic World that eats the lady in high heels. It's not quite that big though, although they get to be 5, 7, maybe 10 feet long. They're big old fish. They were thought to be extinct because for a while we only had skeletons of them. We had only found them in fossils, we being everyone in the world. They have thick skin. They have scales that are 2 inches long, and the scales can be used as sandpaper. Anyway, new science on coelacanths is not good news for the coelacanth population, but they think they live much longer than they used to think. Scientists' theories were that coelacanths lived for 40, 50, maybe 60 years, but new evidence shows that they live to 100 plus years, which, why is that bad news? Seems like they got an extra half a lifespan, but the bad news is that means that they're even more endangered than we thought, because species that live for 100 years and reproduce as slowly as they're reproducing are in trouble. It's kind of like saying that basically if they were living for 30 years, they were doing okay, but if they're living for 100, this is weak coelacanths. I think there's only about 1,000 in the world that are known, and they all live in caves near Africa, and they think that one fish needs to be 50 years old to first start getting it on and having babies, and that is not a good way to stay alive this day and age. If you need to live to 50 just to lose your virginity, there's a good there's a good comedy movie that hasn't been made yet. The 50-year-old virgin coelacanth. Trademark Science AF. So they have this is a team from the French Institute of the Exploration of the Sea, or FIRS. Oh, here it is. IFREMER. I was way off. The French Institute for the Exploration of the Sea, or IFREMER. They found that individuals can live to 100 years old, but also they have gestation periods of at least 5 years. Mama, imagine carrying those babies around for 5 years. And they don't reach sexual maturity until 40 or 50. These are slow-living fish. These are like, down south on the porch with a glass of sweet tea, sort of slow-moving fish. And what they did to decide the new age, originally, so they have scales, and the scales, like trees, a lot of fish have scales that have lines on them, age markers, like rings. Calcified structures that could be counted for that depicted the seasons. And at the time, they had whenever this was, in the 70s, the best guess was the life expectancy about 22 years. They were counting these rings. They counted 22 rings. That meant a 6 foot, 200-pound coelacanth is 17 years old, which implied that they grow really quickly. But actually, then they found by checking up on them that they grow really slowly. So that didn't make any sense. You can't grow 6 feet, 200 pounds in 17 years at the growth rate they were growing. So, coelacanth's hemoglobin is adapted to the slow metabolism, blah, blah, blah. They live low in the sea, down about 650 feet, where it's super cold and dark, and they just kind of slowly waddle around for 100 years. Oh, this is cool. In the 80s, researchers started sending submersibles and remote-operated vehicles to a cave harboring 300 to 400 coelacanths. And they go back to the spot over and over for 20 years. They start to recognize individual coelacanths. So this is how they study them. They said only about 3 or 4 fish would die over those years, and a few more would be born. So they know that they live longer than 22 years. They've been studying them for 20, and that was only a portion of these fish's life. But what they did then was so they counted 22 rings on the scales, right? But then this team from France went in with like a I think they took a laser or some sort of let's see, light waves vibrate every which way. They took polarized light. All the waves now vibrate in the same plane. When light hits the sample containing minerals, blah, 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 the polarized light exaggerates these materials. So basically, they were able to see more rings. Okay, they revealed 5 times more rings in the scales than anyone had seen before. So people were saying, "Oh, there's 22 rings here." They're just looking at it, and then they shine some polarized light on it, and they're like, "Oh no, there's 5 times that. There's 100 rings." That they're called circuli and macrocirculi, and using those instead of 17 years old, that same fish was estimated to be 85. So, talk about catfishing. They thought it was 17, and it turned out to be 85. Both ages sort of off limits for human reproduction. Okay. The age range still might be off. They still don't know what's happening exactly with coelacanths. It's a new area of study. But if it takes 40 years for an individual to mature and 5 more to gestate, removing any one adult would make the population quickly collapse. So basically, they're saying if all of this is true, and it seems to be, coelacanths are in worse shape than you even thought.